So, now what we're going to do is I'm going to go through animated props, level of detail, and re-importing static meshes that some of you aren't quite confident with, making sure they're in the sort of right area that you want them. All right. So, what I've done is I've rejigged and relit and remeshed an existing Unreal setting called the Subway Sequencer, and that you can get the sequencer actual setting if you want to and download it from the Unreal Store. So I'm using Sequencer here, and that just because it comes with some base assets for me to use to just kind of construct something. All right, so currently I'm outside of the setting, and that in my area, what we have is two animated props. So we've got an animated set of drawers here, and we've got an animated fan that exists here, and one here. Now why I've got a giant one there is just so I can get an extra bit of light in there. And what I've got them to do straight away is just to animate off the bat. All right, I'm not going to do any blueprints to get them to animate on Blueprint or anything like that until we come to the blueprints lesson.
So Matt,
yes.
When that one spins, that will the light changes it.
Yeah. So when I turn simulate on,
yeah,
and that you can see in the background there, I've actually got it affecting my light.
Yeah.
All right. And we can see here we've got this drawer repeatedly opening and closing. All right. Now the reason why again is because I don't want to be working with random blueprints going around in it. I'll do that in a separate lesson. But you can get things like fans to just be sort of constantly on and working as their own animated props. You can, let me open up the magnifier. You can get them to change their play rate. So when you have a mesh selected like this, in the details section, you can change the play rate. So you could turn it to say 10, and it goes real fast. Or you could slow it down. So as long as you're working with something, as long as you've got a base set for your animation, you could have some fans that slow, moving real slow. You could have some that speed up, and you can always control that via this play rate. You can obviously have it initially playing. You can have it looping, so it just plays once and then stops. You can change the initial position of it. It's completely up to you how you can change that. But first off, how to get it in to Unreal. So if I pop over to Maya, there we are. So here I have a lovely, very simple set of chest of drawers. All right, these drawers. Go to display. Turn this back on. All right. So these drawers in total, if I go into here, we have 1,285. All right, a little bit excessive maybe in some cases, but to be fair, I think it's justified considering we've got an animated prop here. Now the animation for this is I wanted it to be quite simple, so that when it opens, and that we have a little bit of movement in this drawer here, but the rest of it remains pretty static, because you might get something where when you try and open the drawer, it might just adjust the one beneath it. Now, understanding how your object is going to work and how it's going to animate is something that you need to do before you even start building your model. All right, so if you've got a door that has a slit open at the top, you can't obviously just get away with doing a texture and some normal maps for that. You need to actually create the hole. If you're going to be creating a fridge, you need to model the interior of the fridge and have the door handle as something separate so that it can move and open. And that with this, what I decided to do was have a look at how this drawer is constructed. So I know that if you open a drawer and you pull it out, there's going to be some give when you can sort of push in slightly or pull out. Drawers are never fully slammed shut, especially if they're old and that. So there might be some sort of give. So what I wanted to do is make sure that I could at least push it in a little bit. All right. So making sure, say, let me just turn on my geometry. There we go. All right. So we can see here that this drawer just sort of sits out a little bit. Let's turn you on as well. There we are. So you can see it just sits out a little bit. All right. It doesn't matter that it's kind of clipping the sides, and that because to be fair, when you open it, you don't notice.
That makes the other one shake as well. That's good.
Yeah. So I know that obviously this is going to have some sort of basin in there. So I've connected it to the same mesh and built it off. So let me just do that. So you can see the handle is separate as well. So this is my initial draw. All right. However, what I don't want is when you open this to be able to see through this base mesh. So it does have 4 internal faces. All right. That is perfectly easy, and that you're not taking any extra geometry in there, because even if you wanted to make this mesh a little bit more complicated, as long as you solve it on the outside before it comes into here, you're perfectly okay. You're not going to be able to see through it. All right. So any texturing that goes on in there is ridiculously low grade. So you can see there, it's literally just the reflection of this. It's nothing interesting. So these other drawers, now these ones are not going to open fully. So what I wanted to do is make sure that they looked separate. So these drawers are actually really truncated. All right, they have almost no definition. All it is just extruded out twice and in once. So that if I wanted to bring these out a little bit further, in this case, I could do, and you wouldn't again see straight through the mesh to the bottom. So I've just created a little bit of extra wiggle room in there if I wanted to open a couple more. All right. What we've also got in here is, rather than creating slats in the center for this object, what I've done is I've literally just created this very small bit of geometry here, deleted that back face, so that I've not got harsh shading in the middle. Now what you could do is you could have it permeating throughout the entire mesh if you wanted. So you could have it where it's, so say for instance this bit, so you could have it where it's all the way through like that. However, you're going to be taking up more texture space again. And again, it's up to you. But for me, I feel just having those just sit a little bit in between there works well for me. I'm not having to worry about extra clipping, any Z fighting, anything like that, or any faces overlapping. It's just going to sit at this level. So by that point, I know which bits are going to model. I've modeled them so that if I'm going to be able to see them, or if they're moving, they've got some high fidelity in there, and I can work with this now. So I can get rid of that, don't need it. So here we are. We've got this. Now it's time to structure it, because you need to make sure that whatever you're modeling can be done in sections. So I've got the drawer chassis. All right, so this bit is never ever going to move. All right, then I've got my animated drawers. Very much like how we looked when we modeled animated characters. By having certain things in groups, we can just animate those. So I created an empty group with these pieces in there. And that way I also didn't have to name them. All right, and you can see here on my timeline, this is where my animation goes. All right, so you can see them there. All right. Then what I did in here is I created groups for each of the drawers, like so. and these ones essentially controlled the majority of those movements. So if I wanted to get these ones to rattle as well, I could do. All right. So for the most part, the static draws, so they're never all going to move at the same time, but I could get them to move individually in between. But this is the one that I wanted to do. So messed around with it, come up with some animations. I wanted it to push in slightly, so obviously it's like the physics of someone grabbing the draw rather than just yanking it out straight away. You're more likely to knock it first. So we've got it just go in a little bit. All right, so you've got that bit of a wiggle in there. So you push in, lift up, and then out. All right, I wanted it to feel like it was a bit stiff, so you have to lift it up to drag it out. All right, and again, just using our standard timing and spacing, we can manage to get this to actually feel like it's just sort of, you're actually pulling it out at a normal speed. All right, I worked this over 47 frames, so it was about a second and a half. And that I'm working at 30 FPS for this. That's my target. All right. So as long as my environment runs at around 30 FPS, I'm golden, and that my animation shouldn't break. All right. Now, once you've got your animations and it all works nicely, what we have to do is we have to bake it. So you can see here we have we have a keyframe on every single piece there. All right, this means that it understands what it's animating on each section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my animated pieces. Here we are, like this. You have to do this, by the way. All right, so I'm going to go to my animation. See if I can remember where So it's under key and bake simulation. All right. Well, what you want to do is you want to bake selected. All right, or bake below. All right, so that'll bake below everything that's selected. All right. If you've got multiple things, it's best to bake from below because then it understands what it's doing. And what it's doing when it says it's baking is that it's putting an action on each keyframe so that when you export it, it knows what it's working with. All right. Maya's export animation baking, I find, is very, very finicky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that, or at least this way, I've had I'd say a 99% success rate. Only a couple where it's just for some reason not worked. All right. All of these can remain the same as long as you click below. We are keying all channels. All right, and then you click bake. All right, so it bakes everything. At that point, select what you want to export. So I'm exporting this. File, export selection, and then I will go to the environments, and I will have this as animated draws underscore lesson. There we go. Now the reason why I'm doing export selection is because I don't want to bring my lights or my plane in there, and that you might have other stuff in there as well, and you don't want to bring them in. So there we go. Now I've already got one guy in there. So to import something, we're going to go File, Import. All right, and I need to go to my 3D environments, where I put it, and get my object. Click Open. So for those of you that have done skeletal meshes of imported things, skeletal meshes are slightly different. All right, so when you import, it gives you the option, and it will tell you it's importing a skeletal mesh, and you can see it's already ticked here. You can click that off, and it reverts to a static mesh. Obviously, we want this to be something that we can move. All right, import content and import content type. So skinning weights. So this is good if you are importing things like characters. And that geometry only, that's roughly what we're working with. and that skinning weights only. So if you're not working with any extra geometry, to be fair, you can keep it just geometry and skinning weights, and it'll work fine. If you are bringing in, say, another version of a chest of drawers, but it's got less drawers in there, and that you can use existing skeletons. So you can see in there, I've got my drawer skeletons in there, and it'll use the same hierarchy to do it. I recommend making sure that nothing's in there. If it is like this, just click the little arrow there, and it'll set it to none. By default, it is going to be none. Update skeleton reference pose. It's going to be coming in exactly how we did it. So to be fair, you don't need to be changing these. All right. We've got no morph targets on there. It's not using any Unreal morph targets. We're not bringing any LODs in with this, so it can stay like that. And all of this can again be the same because we need a physics asset with it. Import animations. Now you can import a skeletal mesh without animations, so you can import it without actually animating anything. All right. We are bringing this with animations, and we want it in to be at the animated time that we set it at. So that's the exported time. You could bring this open again. Import meshes in the bone hierarchy. So if you've got meshes that are connected within your within a character or within your within anything that you've got, it'll import those in. If not, you'd have to bring them in separately. It depends what you want to do. We're going to keep it the sample rate we exported it at, and for the most part here, import bone tracks, so that's understanding which track it's animating with. For the most part, you will never, ever, ever need to use any of these. They're perfectly normal. All right, so just whoop. All right, so I know that when I import this model, it's tiny. All right, so I'm going to change my uniform scale to 40. I know it's small. All right, all this is going to do is just going to import it in at a larger size. All right, everything else remains the same. We want to create new materials for it. In fact, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you how to do it if you haven't, because I've already got materials for it. So I can just assign them to the model. All right, and then when you're happy, let me just zoom out, import all. And there we go. So when you import a skeletal mesh, rather than having just the materials, you'll see it comes in with a skeletal mesh, an animation sequence, a physics asset, and a skeleton. Now, it's best to create a folder to create for these. All right, I'm just going to drag them into there, move here, and then I can work just in here. All right, so click a skeletal mesh. So you see here, I have my object. Now, the static mesh viewer, which if I just drag a static mesh up, this one content, nope, whoop. There we are. If I bring this guy up, so this is what it looks like as a static mesh. This is what it looks like as a skeletal mesh. So rather than being on the right, it's on the left. So you'll have everything as per usual. So you'll have your material slots. If you've already got your materials, you can go get them. So I've got mine here. I appear to be missing one of my materials, but never mind. I'm just going to drag and drop you in there. There we are. And then I will go and get my other one, which appears to have mysteriously disappeared. But it's in here somewhere. Nope. Or am I overlapping it? Yes. There you are. Let's drag you in there. All right. So that's how you can get pre-existing stuff. Let's just bring it up to the top. So you can see that preview animation. So you can preview animations that are in there. If you import with an animation sequence, you can click that. You can see there automatically doing that animation, which is lovely. You can see as well, I've also got some other ones in there. Now, what you can do is you can turn this into a static mesh as well. But the important thing, if you want to create one of these, is you can make a new static mesh out of the preview's current pose. So you could create several static meshes of the same piece where the draw is partly out, currently in, or all the way out. So you could create loads of variants just based on that. So you're speeding up your workflow quickly that way as well. At the bottom, you've got your timeline. Again, you can stop it. You can scroll along it as well. On the left, you just have your basic static mesh or mesh icons as well. For the most part, if you've got skinned weights for characters, you would adjust them in the skinned weights section. Obviously, we're not looking at animated characters in this. For the most part, you'll be spending your time either in skeleton, which has your entire skeleton. So this is why your hierarchy is important. All right. Because then I can animate my groups as in which I see fit. See, it should have rotated that, but never mind. All right. Well, these are your bones. For the most part, you're never going to need to retarget because we're using the same animation. And then there's the animation tab. And that, again, we're not going to be clicking on the physics. So our animation one. What that does is that brings up this section in the middle here. Now, for the most part, you are never going to really need to adjust something in here. However, you can add additive tracks which can adjust the way in which this works. So if I add detail in there, there we go. I'll have a variable curve. Ow. Let's see, come on, zoom out for me. All right. So you can see as I've gone through, what this is going to do is it should slow it down as it gets towards the end. Recalculate baked alternatives. Yeah, should do it. Did work before. Nope. Well, that's annoying. So we're working on the other ones. No. Well, that's really annoying. Sorry, guys. I'll have to go back and have a look at that. That's really weird. All right. All right, this is your physics model. So this is essentially the collision of it. So for the most part, it's going to collide around here with the with animated objects. It is a nice little Kinder Egg toy. All right. So just make sure it's sort of roughly in the center. You can change the body creation. So by default, it comes in as a capsule. And that, obviously, this is a box. So update to a box, please. There we go. All right, and you can adjust the size, changing this. Christ. All right. We'll just scale you instead. It is at an angle. I rotated it. All right, but you can create your rigid bodies using this. So if you want an animated physical object, it will then work based off this. There we go. So it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of clipping. So if you wanted it to be physical, it will also work that way. So you can see there, we now have a lovely little physical body. And again, if you changed it to a different primitive, it would then roll around like some sort of ragdoll. You don't want that. All right, so once you're ready, if you've got multiple animations, you can re-import the same mesh and just have it as importing the animations, and it will automatically calculate it to your preview, which is lovely. So we're ready now to bring this into our lesson. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag the skeletal mesh. You see here, it's huge. So it might be slightly too big. So I'm just going to come back in here, go down to my import options. Here we are. We go to the transform, and I'm just going to half that import scale to 20. Go to re-import base mesh. It's going to get a hammer. There we go. Don't know why that's decided not to work. All right, so then it brings it in. We then want to make sure that it's using the correct animation. Where are you? You're in here somewhere. So where it says animation here, we change it to use animation asset. Change the animation. We want it to play this one. And then when we simulate, so I'm not playing the game, by the way. I'm going to simulate here, which is Alt-S. You can see there. Why are you doing this to me? I swear to God, if that's that variable curve haunting me.
That's what happened to the dollar handles on my thing with it. They just fall away. Well, they did the opposite of that.
Right. So look at it now. It's truly haunting me. I'm just going to remove that track. I reckon it didn't like me re-importing my animation.
I reckon this is why games take like a few years to make, because people are just sat there for days trying to figure out why I draw, why I open properly.
I want to know why it's decided just to mess me up.
Yeah, well now it's getting the games that it's going to take like 4 or 5 years now.
Why?
At least.
Why are you doing this to me?
Especially so many games are being held back just to make them better.
All right. If it starts to wind you up, like it really is doing to me,
Break it.
what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete everything and re-import it. All right. Sometimes it just frustrates you to no end. So when you re-import it, you bring it in at 20. All right. What I'm going to do is then just click Import All. I'm going to drag it in. I want to be using the animation asset, that one. And lo and behold, it does work. And that, I reckon it's because I re-imported it and it was not very happy with the way I re-imported it. Alright? Well, there you go. Animated assets. Alright? They are annoying as hell.
I just don't
Yes.
understand how you got that kind of thing.
On our environment, we have
For a light.
you do the same thing in the animation, so it has a constant on master. You know how that's constant? You make it so it's every possibly anywhere between 0 to 8 seconds.
It's more material based, that one,
Okay.
than that. So, the next thing I wanted to go on about was, let me just delete these two references from our thing, is we have static meshes. So static meshes we've been through roughly before. I'll just go through them again. Because the one important thing that we need to look at is LODs. Anyone know what LOD is? Go for it. No, level of detail. So level of detail is essentially how detailed you want your mesh to be at a specific distance. So who in here has had issues controlling their polygon count? All right. So for those of you that are struggling with controlling your polygon count, all is not lost. Because what you can do is you can create level of detail groups. So if I import a new asset, so if I import this rock, all right. So here we are back on our static mesh stuff. All right, our imports. All right. Now static mesh come in with a LOD group. All right, usually none. Now what you can do is if you click this, you can see you've got them for decorations, foliage, high detail, large prop, level architecture, small prop, and vistas. And that vistas acts, this changes how close you need to be before LODs kick in. All right, so if it's a small prop, likelihood is, unless you get really close to it, it's not really going to show the highest possible. A large prop, it's going to keep it as a high detail for a little bit longer. High detail is probably going to remain high detail as much as possible. And level architecture is going to be based around your level. All right, so I'm going to be bringing in a rock. It's going to be a large prop. So I want that in there. We want to generate light map UVs. This is important. All right, you can create your own. But what this will do is this creates a separate UV channel so that you've got one UV map for your textures and then it will automatically generate one for light maps for when you bake your lighting in. All right. Otherwise, if you've got UV shells stacked on top of each other, you might have a shadow on part of it where it's like, well, that shouldn't be there. There's no light to it. If you have multiple meshes in one object, you can combine them together. Because when you import it, by default, this isn't ticked. All right, and what it will do is it will combine it into a single object. All right. You can create your own mesh LODs if you want. I recommend letting Unreal deal with that, but it depends if you want to control that. And again, everything remains the same. Now I know again that this thing imports really small, and this one, it did work at 40. All right, again, I don't want to create some new materials because I've already got them. And I'll click Import All. And here we are. There's my rock. So, first thing you'll notice, this rock is on its side. Occasionally, if you export some things from Mudbox, it gets a bit angry and it doesn't like things being at the correct angle. You may find this with some models anyway. If that's the case, go to your import settings, and on your rotation here, you can just change one of these to 90 degrees and re-import base mesh. Does work, but I did it on the wrong angle. Re-import base mesh, and there you go. And it rotates it the correct way. It's best to do that in here, because if you rotate it in your scene, every time you have to bring it in, you then have to rotate it back the right way. It is. So it's best to just make sure it's here, or make sure it works in your actual environment. But sometimes it gets a little bit out of hand, so it's always good to do it in here. It's also good if you get things that are kind of hovering off the ground and such. But this is connected to our grid, so we're okay. All right. So when we bring something in with LODs, put it in an LOD group, you can see here you can still change that. Go around and change it. And that we're not importing anything. It's created, but if we click it, we can see it's created LOD 0, which is our standard, and it's created 1, 2, and 3. So we've got 3 extra level of details in there. And those level of details will kick in as we go away. LOD 0 is the default. And we can change that. We can change the amount we've got in there. But for the most part, it starts at 0. So to give you an idea, let me chuck the textures on it. Lesson 1 content, rock. Whomp. There we are. So that's our texture on it. That is our wireframe for our object. So if I then go away, notice how that object is substantially less complicated. So as I come in, you see that detail popping in. All right. As we zoom out even further, okay, it's just taking my camera all over the place. So we get to ridiculous amounts. If you're unsure if it's working, you can see up here, by default, I've got 996 triangles. As I zoom out, stop moving the camera. You can see there that value is changing and is halving. All right. So if I reach a certain point, my geometry immediately halves in complexity. Why would this be useful?
You've got like a load of polygons that are just going to freeze somewhere. Like
You've got a load of polygons that are just going to freeze something. Yeah. What else?
It's going to save useful processing power for other more important objects.
It's going to save processing power for more important objects. What else? Well, say for instance, my level, my rock is way in the distance, like this, and I can see it. But for here, I can tell, yeah, it's a rock. Like that. Get a little bit closer, come around a couple more corners. All right, yeah, still a rock. Hey, that rock's quite cool. I like the look of that. Let's get real close to it. Wow, the detail on that rock. Wow, that's incredible. I wonder how they managed to get that in there. LODs. It's so that it doesn't have to process all of that intense detail that you've modeled in there straight away. It can just give you the illusion of it. All right, because you don't need to see 900 polygons at this distance. You can't see that. It's a ridiculous amount. Think about it as polygons per pixel. And that how many polygons do you need to be able to see to get the fidelity out of that model? And that I don't need 1,000 polygons there. I only need 124. All right, but as I get closer and I'm able to kind of see more detail on it, I need to be able to see more geometry. Your textures will do the legwork. All right, and again, you can change this. I can change to high detail, yes. All right, you can see now I've got more LODs in there. All right, and those LODs aren't going to pop in as much, but I could go further and further away. Now it's at 62. Now it's at 32. There we go. So if you've got a character with really, really high poly face, or if you've got something that if you get really close to it, you can see all the little nuts and bolts and scratches in there, have it on high detail so that when you get up close, you can see that level of detail. But it needs to essentially fill your screen at that point. All right, if you're working with level architecture, you're probably going to need like 4 again, but these ones will kick in quicker. All right, so here now it hits 124, whereas if I change that to if I change this to large prop, here it's 248. So have a play around with these and see which one kind of works for you. All right, because then when you bring them in to your environment, and that you can create something quite varied. And while I'm over here, those aren't ridiculously high poly now. They're lower in terms of poly count. All right. If things I can't see, they're even smaller than that because it's automatically bringing those LODs in based on my camera distance. All right. You want to make sure that your geometry is not overpowering. I know some of you, when I loaded up your levels, it kind of start to jog a little bit. All right. So understanding your level of detail is important. And as long as you could re-import a static mesh so you've got a higher polygon one and it will work on a different LOD. All right. But it's important that you bring those out. All right. So you can see here that's what one version of the rock would look like. And then here we are. So you're going away and you're reducing that poly count in your map, and it's not even taking it up. So you can see there, in fact, if I just zoom in really, really close on here, you can see it popping in and out. All right. Now, I know some people get ridiculously aggressive about popping in video games, but how much it saves you in terms of processing power is incredibly important. All right, so don't ever take it for granted. Make sure that your level runs. All right, and also use modular architecture. And that, so you can create some stuff like this. So this is the same rock repeated over and over again. And that, we just got it like upside down there. We got that one kind of on a corner there, and all of it's the same. All right. So don't be afraid to experiment just to give your level a little bit of extra personality. All right. Try to break up harsh corners as well, and that. Don't let it just sit there. All right. You can get rid of some of it. It'll look fine. That's baked in there, that detail. But yeah, so experiment. But now you guys know how to create animated content. If it annoys you, delete it and re-import it. Materials work exactly the same as importing normal models. Next week, what we'll be doing is we'll be having another look at substance. We'll also be starting to look at some more complicated materials in there. And we'll be ending up the week after, so that'll be during FE half term, looking at how to create master materials and more complex materials when bringing them into Unreal. Okay, so next week is substance, week after is Unreal. Any questions?
Oh, that's pretty good.
Nope, awesome.